And somebody came up to me and he says, I signed on your bill this morning because I went to my town hall meetings. I went to 4 of them, and at every meeting people were there and say, it's time that we have transparency of the Fed. I call them the fourth branch of government. Some people don't think of them as part of the government because they're so secretive. But we created it, we can end it, we take no responsibility to supervise it and look at what they're doing. We spend hundreds of billions, but the Fed deals in trillions, and they don't have any responsibility to tell us about it. So there's a lot of power there, and it deserves looking at. And I think, I have to say, Barney Frank has been sympathetic to this. He's for transparency. He's not for hard money and the type of monetary policy I'm talking about. He believes that we should have more transparency of the Fed. So whether this bill gets passed or something very similar, the mood in the country is such that not only do they want us to be better in handling the appropriated fund and knowing where these TARP funds went, the American people have awakened to this whole idea of what the Federal Reserve does behind the scenes. So I'm delighted. I have been pushing this monetary issue for more than 30 years, believing it was the significant economic issue of our time. And I think people are starting to realize this, and we're going to keep hearing about it, and there's a good chance it will eventually make it to the floor.
You were on Freedom Watch. Many banks which participated in the TARP program, either voluntarily or under coercion from the Fed. I mean, we all know now that the FDIC threatened to audit banks that didn't accept TARP funds, and they all caved. Some of them willingly wanted the money. Some of them took the money in order to avoid the audit. Not that they would fail the audit, but everyone knows how costly an audit can be in terms of the time of your employees and the value of your stock and your public image. But many of the banks that have sought to pay the government back have run into a brick wall, and it's come in a couple of forms. One form is, we know you're okay, ABC Bank Corp, but we're worried that the system isn't okay, and we need you to keep our money in your bank or to loan it out there. Another roadblock is, well, let's see, you own some Chrysler and General Motors bonds. We want you to take 15 or 20 cents on the dollar on those bonds, and then we'll think about accepting your TARP funds back. Question, Congressman Paul, is this not the classic definition of fascism? Private ownership and public control. And what right, if any, does the government have to say to bank management, do what we want or we audit you? Buy this bond back at 15 cents of what you paid for it, sell it for 15 cents on the dollar, or we'll try and control your management decisions.
Yes, this certainly is a form of fascism. And once you make a bargain with the devil, you know you get locked in. But in a way, banks and others and corporations have been involved to some degree. So I always argue that if you get involved 1% of the time and nobody seems to notice it, you've sacrificed 100% of the principal, and it leads to the kind of problem that we have. So you take fractional reserve banking and using low interest rates by the Federal Reserve. How many times has the Federal Reserve bailed out the banks? And once you get trapped into that and using the insurance money, then you have to do their bidding because they have too much power. So this is why I argue the case for more purity in not getting involved with the government in these programs. Even conservatives always annoy me to no end. They would concede to the liberal and say, well, this welfare program, I don't believe in it, but you got to help the people who need it. And that's only 2 or 3%. So they concede 100% of the principal, and then all of a sudden it's 2 or 3% becomes 30 or 40 or 50% because problems get worse. This is what's happened in the banking industry, and I understand there are people probably honestly in the banking system that would like to, not be involved, and they get pushed into it. But the government will use force and threats, and that's exactly what they're doing because some of those individuals right now want control. They want federal control, and maybe they're just arguing on who's going to make the final decision. Will they be businessmen who have sold their souls to the government, or will it be the politicians who will now set salaries and tell them which kind of cars to build? I mean, that's absurd. And if you want to see a failure, all we have to do is continue with this process.
Governor Perry of Texas and I, the only 3 people across the country who think that states have a right to secede from the Union, that any piece of legislation that a state legislature has enacted that any resolution it has agreed to, it can, by the ordinary course of legislation, unenact or disagree to, and that secession is a valuable tool used properly to keep the federal government in check?
Absolutely, and I think you're alluding to the fact of nullification. You know, if we'd have had nullification where the states could just say we don't accept that because it's unconstitutional, it's too big a burden, or if there was always this potential that a state could leave, the federal government would have treated all the states, differently. And I like to use this argument even to appeal to the left, because you know my position on this drug war and all these laws that the federal government passes. But what do? They march in to California. California wants to deal with the problem their way, but our federal government comes in and says, no, we have no respect for what the state government is doing, and we're going to overrule. So the left ought to realize this as well, that the states ought to have, a little more authority. But as soon as you talk about states' rights, they want to paint you in the corner and saying that you're some type of a radical that wants to go back to slave days and things like that. But the principle is very sound. It was well known. It was accepted by the founders. The first group of people, states that wanted to talk about it were the people in New England. And I think another good analogy that most Americans would respond to, we belong to the United Nations. 25% of the people want out of the United Nations. The majority still want in. But I'll bet the very large majority, if not practically 100% of Americans would say that we have a right to get out of the UN if we don't like it. We pay most of the bills, as did the South, before the Civil War. They paid most of the bills. If we pay too much of the bills and they outnumber us, which they do, that's why we are not attending some of these conferences, because we don't have the votes, even though we pay the bills. So I think most Americans would say, sure, we can leave the UN. That's a type of secession. And of course, we're proud to support the secession of all the republics around the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union broke up. The principle, as you point out, is a very important principle, and sadly, it was lost because of the Civil War.
The principle still remains in the Declaration of Independence, which is still part of the federal law that the Congress has enacted. When the central government loses its responsiveness to the people, when it fails to protect freedom, when it violates natural rights, it's the duty of the people to alter and abolish it. How much more time do we have? Okay, we have about 4 more minutes.
Okay, let me just add one thing if I can. It's interesting that they accuse some of us who might suggest that we accept this principle. They say that we actually are committing treason and we're un-American, when you think about it. I mean, it's the most American principle alive. I mean, we wouldn't have America if we didn't believe in this principle of secession.
Congressman Ron Paul, always a pleasure. Until next Wednesday on Freedom Watch. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Judge.
Thank you, Congressman. Many of you may have heard about the awful experience that we're now going to bring you a tape of involving an American entering the United States from Mexico, and what was he doing? Driving through the southwest of the United States, and his encounters with federal agents. Take a listen to this.
This is the United States.
Under the Constitution, this is a legal checkpoint.
Oh, really? What part of... Name the section of the Constitution.
100 miles of the border.
So within 100 miles of the border, the Constitution does not apply? Within 100 miles of the border, the Fourth Amendment does not apply? I'm not trying to make a scene. I want to go to work. I'm trying to go to work. I'm trying to go on my way.
Sir, you work for the fire department?
I want to go free on my way. That's none of your business. I want to go free on my way. Hey, what are you do? Are you going to do something to my car? Huh? Are you going to destroy my car?
Negative.
Are you going to do something to my car without asking me?
Negative.
Because I just want to go on my way.
Negative.
There's no reason for you to do anything to my car. I don't know what tools he has there. Just tell me when I'm free to go.
Sir, would you cooperate with the inspection, you will be allowed to depart and thereby continue your...
I want to go free on my way.
Well, you can't, sir. We're detaining you.
What suspicion are you detaining me on?
We're detaining you on mere suspicion of illegal activity, which is all...
What illegal activity do you suspect me of, sir?
Right now, you're interfering in a federal investigation.
This is... listen, Agent Hutchison, what have I done to make you suspect me of illegal activity?
Your lack of cooperation in and of itself...
I don't want to cooperate because I want to go free on my way. I have cooperated by stopping here. By stopping, I've cooperated with the checkpoint. I stopped and I obeyed the law, and now because I am suspicionless. I want to go free on my way because I am a U.S. citizen, and the Fourth Amendment says that I have the right